This is an entire book about how to shoot steroids into your butt.
I think you could do that on Rusev Day.
Every day's Rusev Day.
I'm so confused what you guys are talking about, but I'm glad that you're saying it. And welcome to the Down in Front podcast, the official podcast of downinfrontpodcast.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for joining. If this is your first episode, we want to say thanks so much for hanging out. What we usually do here on the Down in Front podcast is that we review movies, TV shows, video games, all a bunch of stuff, all while having usually our favorite alcoholic beverages or just hanging out with each other, enjoying the time. And tonight we are giving you a full review of Pet Sematary, one of the newest films in theaters right now from the, I believe it's co-directors, Kevin Klosch and Dennis Widmer, starring Jason Clarke and John Lithgow. I don't know if anybody else would know anybody else in this movie.
Hey, the actress name is Amy Semittz. She was in another movie I saw called Upstream Color, but very, very small indie movie.
Interesting. In any case, before we get into our review, all of our spoiler section, we're going to have a bit of a roundtable to talk about what else we've been watching, along with what we currently are drinking tonight. So as always, I'm going to toss it over to my best friend, my confidant. We always hang out and watch movies together. Pretty much, he's the best thing that ever happened in my life. Bryland, what's going on, man? What you sipping on tonight? And what else have you been watching?
I hope I'm not the breast thing that ever happened in your life.
You picked up on that, I see.
But instead of milk, I'm drinking Gatorade, the fruit punch flavor.
You don't have any more Stacy's moms?
No more Stacy's moms. They're gone.
Damn it.
They end at 6, and it takes 6 weeks to drink 6 of them. But no, I've been recuperating from a bad illness over the weekend, but I am feeling better and everything. But what I watched while I was bedridden, I did my MCU rewatch, so basically watched every MCU movie except for Captain Marvel again. I'll probably catch that sometime this week. And it's really cool to just revisit these movies, and it's kind of eye-opening just because I was looking at my comprehensive list of how I would rate the Marvel films in terms of quality, and I found that not much changes at the top, but once I get into that middle section and at the bottom, I did change a lot around, so I will have an updated list coming out very soon. I just have to watch Captain Marvel again because the jury's still out, I think, where it falls into the comprehensive, definitive list of the quality of the Marvel movies. But other than that, last weekend was WrestleMania weekend, so a lot of good wrestling going on. And WrestleMania was actually really good this year. So the main title match, which was the three-way between Charlotte, Becky, and Ronda Rousey for all the women's titles, was actually lived up to the hype and everything. So it was really cool to see them actually bring a really cool performance to WrestleMania and cap it off really well. I thought the Triple H Batista one was better than expected because I had never watched Batista wrestle before, and this is my first time watching him. I was like, hey, he's pretty good for like the big strong dude that they always have. He actually did a really good job, and also I also really enjoyed Kofi versus Daniel Bryan, which is probably like the best match I thought that night because it just kept on going on, and you could go either way at any second. So, but appreciated that Kofi came out the champ. It was well deserved, and I'm interested to see where they're going to take him as well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm bummed that I missed some of the talk from WrestleMania. I think the last time I watched a little bit of it, it seems to be a pretty good time. So I'm glad you guys are still kind of catching up with that. So it's cool.
Yeah, and I immediately canceled my WWE Network account.
Well, now you don't say it like that.
No, but not because of WrestleMania, just because of budget.
Fair enough. Well, it's always great to have you on. It's great to see your face, and I'm excited to get your take on Pet Cemetery. Did you read the book by any chance?
I mean, if I did, it was a long time ago, and it just mixes in with a lot of books out there. So
Fair enough. I will toss it over to one of my good friends. Not as best friends as Brylan, but I guess he's all right. He plays the guitar sometimes. The Shredder blew it. What's going on, man? What you been sipping on tonight, and what else have you been watching?
I thought you were gonna say Mocha. That took
Now,
me off.
ew.
The guitar playing threw me.
I
So
feel
yeah.
like the ew was unnecessary.
Very
Are
necessary.
we talking about mumps again? So today, I am drinking, keeping it very topical, Strange Old Woods. It is a beer by Solemn Oath Brewery. Oh, Solemn Oath. That's an N. That's
That shouldn't
weird.
be hard to read.
No, it's in weird cursive. It looks like a Y. It's Solemn Oath Brewery. It's a New England Pale Ale, IPA, New England IPA. So I thought all sorts of applicable to this film. It's not that great though. It's all right. I hadn't tried it before. I was drinking gin. It's not that great, but we'll go with it. As for what I've been watching, still doing the MCU rewatch. This morning I finished up Thor 2, The Dark World, which I think is maybe the most frustrating movie I've ever watched in my entire life. Just because the reason I say this is that there's scenes in there that are like really good. Like I think Frigga's funeral scene is maybe the most beautiful scene in the entire MCU, maybe except for Vormir in Endgame or in Infinity War. Maybe, but like definitely one or two. And there's also a couple other moments that the characterization is part of what made Thor Ragnarok so good, but they just don't stick with it at all. Like there's one scene where he's trying to go to the final battle and he gets stuck in the subway. And he's taking the subway instead of like, swinging on Mjolnir. And so, he's like, oh, how do I get there? And then the lady has this weird, like, the train moves and she kind of bumps into him and like gropes him a little bit. And it's pretty funny. It's like it's a funny little thing, which when they bring it back and make the whole freaking movie like that, it's amazing. But yeah, it's such a waste.
Well, Blue, it is great to have you on. It's great to see your face. So I'm excited to get your take on Pet Cemetery. Have you seen the original 1989 movie?
No, nor have I read the book. So I'm
okay. Well, I know you can't read, so it's okay.
Functionally useless. Well, yeah, you can do books on tape.
Can you?
I found out about those a couple of years ago.
Gotcha. I'll toss it over to one of my good friends, one of my best buds. We grew up together. Pretty sure that we just talk all the time, but sometimes he doesn't text me. Maybe he lost my number. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't like me as much as I thought he did. Who knows? Mocha, what's going on, man? Great to see your face. Great to have you. What you sipping on tonight? What else have you been watching? And great to have you back from France.
Hey, yo, what's up, everybody? It's great to be back. Everything Warren said was right, and I'm happy to be here with you all. Yeah, as Warren just let everybody know, I did just get back in from a trip to France, which was pretty dope. This time I got a chance to kind of scoot around a little bit. Saw Paris, saw Lyon, both beautiful cities. Lyon was pretty breathtaking. But I'm glad to be back here in my apartment for 2 days because I have to travel again to Boston tomorrow. So maybe I'll see some of you guys. Who knows? But regardless, I'm glad to be back. Glad to be back on the show. What I'm drinking tonight is a little bit of Buffalo Trace Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. Eagle-eared listeners of the pod will realize that I've been drinking this same bottle of Buffalo Trace since mid-December 2018. And that's because I've barely been in my home since mid-December 2018. So this guy is still going strong. And because my life is in shambles, I'm not drinking it out of a glass tonight. I'm just drinking it straight from the bottle, as God intended. That's for what I've been drinking or what I've been watching. On the flight back from France, I have this thing where whenever I'm on a flight, I'll watch whatever Oscar-nominated movies I didn't bother to watch during the year before. And so for this flight, it was A Star Is Born. So I finally got a chance to see that movie. I kind of get it now. I get why everybody was so excited and into it. I was thoroughly surprised by the deep gravelly bass of Bradley Cooper's voice. It was not what I expected and kept me quite entertained the entire movie, despite the fact that I have a lot of issues with the movie as a whole. And as my co-hosts here were woe to find out, I now have the song "Shallow" stuck in my head for the first time, so I finally discovered it. So I've been belting it around as I walk around the neighborhood lately, and it feels good. It feels good to sing that song. It feels good to be in on it. But yeah, I'm glad to be back. Glad to see all of you, and I'm ready to talk about this this doozy of a movie.
Whose gravelly
Sounds
voice
like a
did you appreciate more, Bradley Cooper or Sean Elliott's?
Or
Wait,
Lady
say it
Gaga.
again?
Lady Gaga's.
Did you say whose voice?
Whose gravelly voice did you appreciate more?
Oh man, Bradley Cooper's. That voice was very unexpected, and it did some things to me that I was not allowed to embrace in this very crowded airplane.
Some things to me downstairs. Mocha, have you seen the original Pet Sematary, or have you read the book?
I did not read the book, but I did see the original Pet Sematary when I was a kid, though. So I don't really remember any of the details or how I felt about the movie. All I remembered was the cat and the fact that things came back, and that it was not a good thing that they came back.
Yeah.
Which was pretty much my crib notes going into this film.
Fair enough.
I remember
fair
the cat and the Achilles tendon. And that's it from the original one.
Oof. We'll definitely talk about that a little bit later. Well, Mocha, it's great to have you on. Great to see your face.
Same.
Oh, thanks. Oh, good stuff. I'm going to toss it over to one of my best friends, the host of The Fear Boners. I was very excited. Right after I left this movie, I immediately texted them and said, hey, are you going to be on this show? And to make sure that he was able to be here. The marvelous, the amazing Abbott, Andrew Abbott. How's it going, man?
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the inclusivity of this podcast.
Of course, it's because I like you the most here. Just don't tell anybody else.
Okay, I'll
What
keep that.
else? Perfect. What? Just me and you. What else have you been watching? What are you sipping on?
Yeah, just to preface this, a friend of the pod, Sean, was up in town visiting for the last several days. So I'm actually doing a rehydration decleanse right now. So I'm literally just drinking water because we went ham, had it rough.
Good.
Finished off an entire bottle of bacon flavored bourbon, which, is a thing that people do from time to time. So nursing that. As far as what I'm watching, we did watch a bunch of really good, weird horror stuff over the past weekend. But I'm going to call out one that was probably the shittiest that I'd seen in a while, because it's unfortunate because it was super hyped to the point of overhyped. It was kickstarted, all this shit, because it had a bunch of horror icons in it. It was actually written by the late, I'm actually blanking on the dude's name, but he was the original Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He
John
wrote
Johansson?
the script. Yep. He wrote the script and he starred in the film, and it was a huge deal. It had like one of the guys who played Jason. It had a bunch of Scream Queens in it. It had the Candyman. It had Danny Trejo. It had Chop Top. It had all these famous horror icons in the movie. And we were so excited to watch it. We watched the whole thing, and it was absolute garbage.
Oh no.
And this movie is called Death House, and I would warn anybody from watching it. It's unfortunately one of the worst movies I've ever seen. The
That's
plot is
saying
terrible.
Something.
The acting is terrible. It's really bad. And I've seen some shitty movies. This one is near the top of the list, unfortunately.
How can you go wrong with Tony Todd?
He's probably the greatest part of the movie, and he's only in the beginning 3 seconds and the last 3 seconds. And the part that he plays doesn't even make sense. It's not even anything contextually related. Like, the plot doesn't make sense. I could go on about this shit movie, but instead I want to talk about the fact that I also recently watched, without knowing it, a movie that was done by the directors of the new Pet Sematary, one of their last films together, called Starry Eyes, which is actually a really good horror movie, an independent little production they did that basically takes the story of the archetypical story of a girl from middle of nowhere decides to go out to Hollywood and become like a big famous movie star, but she struggles along the way, takes a bunch of shitty jobs to try to become this new starlet. And she'll do whatever it takes to get there. And it's super cringy and super awkward. And she has all these really terrible tics and habits and nervous things that she does when she can't really deal with rejection really well. So she like pulls out her hair and she grinds her teeth and she throws tantrums and all these horrible things, just really raw in like single take shots. and then out of nowhere, this crazy, like, satanic twist gets thrown into it, and the last 15 minutes of the movie, it takes like a Hereditary twist, and I know some of you have seen Hereditary, so the last 15-20 minutes of the movie just goes off the rails, buckets of blood, freaking insane. And I would definitely recommend it because Starry Eyes, in my opinion, is better than the new Pet Sematary.
Yeah,
So check it out if you have a chance. I know it's on Shudder and a couple other streaming services. It might be on Netflix.
Nice.
But yeah.
Good stuff. Well, I'm definitely excited to get your opinion for Pet Sematary. Have you? I know you don't know how to read that well, but have you read the book? And have you seen? I know you definitely have seen the original movie.
I've seen the original movie, but it's funny, when I rewatched it recently to get ready for this one, I realized that most of my memories were from Pet Sematary 2. So I thought Pet Sematary 2 was Pet Sematary 1. I really love the original Pet Sematary. I haven't read the book. I've looked at it really hard, but have not been able to retain any of the actual words in their correct order.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. You should also get that checked out, but that's on you. Well, Ab, it's great to have you on, and it's great to see your face again for you to give us all the knowledge about horror movies.
I was just looking at pictures of the original Pet Sematary, and that cat's a big chonker, and I think I appreciate that.
I like
Nobody's coming.
I like the design of the original cat more than this new one, but again, that's something that we'll get into it a little bit more.
In the original movie, the cat died of diabetes.
He's not that fat, is he? I don't remember him being that
No,
fat.
he's one of those English cats that's just poofy or round faced.
Round faced cat.
Nothing wrong with that. My name is Warren. I will be your host this evening. I am currently sipping on some vodka and sweet tea. Got to keep it simple. I watched a movie. We actually watched a bunch of these movies back to back. So I finally got a chance to watch Ingrid Goes West. Have you guys seen this movie?
Oh, how was that? I've been meaning to watch it.
I saw the trailer and I was really interested just because I think what's her face is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both really enjoyed, me and Emma. I think we both really enjoyed this movie a lot. Yeah, I couldn't remember her name either. Not Black Widow. What's the other woman in there?
Black Panther.
Scarlet Witch. Yeah, thank you. Black Panther and Scarlet Witch are in this movie. So it stars Aubrey Plaza with Elizabeth Olsen and O'Shea Jackson Jr. And it just goes off of, without spoiling too much of the movie, of this girl who seemingly have something a bit deeper, kind of emotionally with her. She gets a large lump sum of money and ends up kind of stalking a couple people. And so she ends up stalking one of her idols and meets her, and you figure out what all happens from when they finally meet and kind of clash, and they find out more of her background. So the movie's on Hulu right now. I definitely will recommend. It is very entertaining. It's very funny, but it also has a pretty solid, I think, message. And I just haven't seen a movie like shot like that. It just felt a bit different how they were actually kind of portraying it, and also just kind of showing how the people in LA and how they should be portrayed, I guess. I don't know. So I really enjoyed it. That's what I've been watching. I'm also going through the Marvel Cinematic Universe rewatch along with Brylan, I guess everybody here except Abbott. And I am about to finish Black Panther.
Or if I'm using it with another Panther, like the Pink Panther, maybe?
No, what was the movie that I should watch after Black Panther?
Infinity War.
Yeah, Infinity War.
No, it was Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange. All right.
What?
I got it mixed up. Yeah,
You're doing an interesting order.
Whatever. I'm currently watching Doctor Strange. But I have been kind of going through. So after that, I have to do Thor Ragnarok, and then it's Infinity War. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to raise my glass to our favorite section where we're dedicating some sips and some shout outs to all of our people, all of our supporters, and maybe some people that we just do some light stalking every other Wednesday. So who knows? So I will raise my glass and I will give the first shout out to Jason Clarke in this movie because, one, I'm really excited not seeing you as a villain, ? And two, I really love his faces that he makes. I know me and Brylan get into this joke a lot of every time we see certain characters that pop up in the movie, they have to be the villain. Pedro Pascal is definitely one of them too. Like, oh fuck, you know he's gonna be the villain. And so I was really bummed yet excited that he kind of wasn't sort of the villain. He actually was a protagonist, and he had some endearing stuff in him. So definitely kind of kudos to you, Jason Clark, because I really enjoyed you in this film. So thanks to you, my friend. How about you, Blew It?
Yeah, I gotta say the NATO alphabet. Send a sip to that. It's like, where else do you come up with things like whiskey, India,
Whiskey Tango Foxtrot.
Lima, Sierra, Oscar, November? Like, this is crazy.
You're reading it, aren't
It's
you?
so nuts.
You're reading off of it right now.
Obviously, it's gonna blow your mind about 5 minutes when you figure out what I spelled.
I know. I'm sure it will. Brylan, who are you dedicating your sip to?
I'm going to send my sip out to J.J. Abrams. This weekend, Star Wars Celebration is going on, so the impending release of the first Star Wars Episode 9 trailer, which should be on Friday, is happening. So
Yes.
it's going to be
everything.
impressive to see if my nerd boner can hang out with all this excitement happening right now within game and now this. So, JJ, don't let us down. Star Wars for life.
You probably will.
Nerd boner is gonna hang out. That was some great wording that you say there. Mocha, what you got as your sin to sip today?
Yeah, I'm gonna send a sip to the city of Lyon in France. You know, it was freaking beautiful. That city is just gorgeous. It is. Paris is nice. Paris is really nice. But as far as I'm concerned, Paris is just New York City with funny accents. But like Lyon was just straight up dope. Gorgeous city, cool people. Everyone was awesome except for I went into a bookstore and the lady there tried to tell me that I couldn't read the books. I had to buy one or get out. And I tried really hard to explain to her that I'm illiterate in that country, but she wasn't having it. So anyway, aside from her, I've sent a sip out to Leon.
I was going to make a joke that you're trying to tell her that you can't read, but true.
One of my coworkers is actually from Lyon, so you might have actually cursed out his mom or something.
I hope so.
Jeez. Okay. Abbott, who are you dedicating your sip to tonight?
My sip is a nice saucer of milk for Church the cat, who is actually 4 or 5 cats in this film, but he really stole the show. I think he did the best acting gig throughout the movie because he's such a sweet kitty in the beginning of the movie, and then by the end, oh my lord, he is a changed kitty.
It's funny because
very impressive.
They must have had
Full
like
name, Winston Churchill,
a professional like cattail puller to get the cat angry for those scenes, right? Because you can't direct a cat. You just gotta like.
Well, if you saw the credits, there were, I think it was 4 or 5 different cats. So there were probably like 2 really well-tempered, nice cats, and then 2 that were just absolute bastards.
Well, half of them died.
Which one was hungry at the time?
Awesome. Half of them died during the production. So, whoops.
That's a lie.
But they buried him and they came back.
It's actually not.
Oh, jeez, that's.
Is that dark for you? And with that, we are going to take our break. So we are getting to our spoiler section. So if you have not seen the original, if you've not read the book, if you have not seen the new 2019 version, we're not going to be talking about the 1992, I believe, is Pet Sematary 2. So we're not going to be covering that because that's not canon for ours. We want to say to hit pause, go check the movie out. I think for right now, there's not too many other movies in theaters currently. That's going to be as good, I think, but we'll see. And so we'll take a break, and we'll see you soon for a full spoiler edition of Pet Sematary.
Was that a fart? Did someone just fart?
I spelled Wilson in the NATO alphabet. Just
And we are back, and we are the Down in Front podcast. We have our very special guest, Andrew Abbott, the host of the Fear Boners, and this is our spoiler section for Pet Sematary in 2019. So if you've not seen this movie, we want to let you know that anything after this we will be spoiling, so keep an eye out. What we usually like to do is that we break it up into a couple of different sections. So tonight we'll talk about the acting and then the characters, and then later on we're going to also talk about comparisons and a little bit differences, because there are a lot of differences from the original movie, and more so the story. The original book came out in 83 and the movie came out in 89. And so we will be talking about that things. So I'm going to toss it over to Brylan to start us off to tell us about the acting and characters.
Yeah, so with this movie, and after watching it, I want to sum up like my opinions of the acting and the characters based on this, that they are all standard horror trope characters, especially for Stephen King movies. There's no definite deep thoughts or deep takeaways of where these characters go. It's pretty obvious, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if it's done really well. And I think with Jason Clarke, he actually does a really good job being that standard Stephen King like male protagonist that you would see in a lot of his stories, that he's this like kind of nerdy-ish but also kind of doting on his family, but also at the same time also has something that he's obsessed with that makes him a flawed character that that leads him down to a dark path. And I think Jason Clarke does this really well. I was actually joking in our chat the other day that I think he has amnesia face. And what I mean by that is that whenever I see him in a movie, I'm like, oh, who is that? And I like have to look him up every time. And every single time it's Jason Clarke. It's just that actor that does it for me. But I think like some of that blankness helps with this movie because it helps it easier to connect, easier to follow this character around. And I find that the cool thing about it is that how he handles situations is really well done. That when he is a doctor, he's very professional. When he's at home, he is a loving dad and faithful husband and everything. But I mean, nothing is unexpected from him. But one thing I wish he did was I wish he washed that damn cat when it came back to life, because it was just terrible seeing it just all sticky and nappy and covered all the time.
When they go to try to brush
Oh,
like
God.
the cat, and I was just like, oh, why?
It's water.
Just
Water
put
on
it in water. What?
Soap it
why?
up.
Dunk them in some hot water.
Oh, jeez. But I can't agree with you more, Ryland. I know we talked about in the most recent movie I saw Jason Clarke in, which he had a pretty solid performance, was First Man. It was definitely kind of a side character.
No,
So
he
it's
saw
nice to
Serenity.
no. You shut your mouth. I didn't see that movie. So the better movie that I recently saw him in was First Man. Good call. I completely forgot about that movie for obvious reasons. Serenity is trash. But he had like a side character. This one, he was a really kind of predominant character a lot. I like the fact that they at least focus a little bit less on him than I thought they were. I thought this movie was definitely going to just be about him, but they actually kind of focused and kind of expanded it and kind of talked about the family a bit more, which also gave me or allowed me to kind of like his character more, and also his beliefs of being a science man and his thoughts on religion and talking about that with his 9-year-old or 8.5 and a 9-year-old daughter, and the difference between that and the mother Rachel, and like we're just basically kind of introduced to a lot of these things that at least allows me to at least care a little bit more about this family, although already knowing that it's going to be every horror trope I can think of. It still made it, at least did it better from the other horror movies that we've previously reviewed. And going into this movie, I was really nervous that I was going to hate this movie, and I did. So he was definitely one of the reasons why I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think, to speak on that, I think they did a good job balancing horror tropes versus like getting artsy with it. this film definitely could have gotten really artsy when it came to bringing something back from the dead. And I think they touched on it a little bit on how, like, Jason Clarke's character wasn't done with his daughter, right? Like, he wanted more time with her. And that makes sense. It speaks to everyone on a human level. And they didn't dwell on that, which was perfect, because if they did, I probably would have hated this, because I don't think this movie is smart enough to actually dive into that in any sort of meaningful way. But they didn't, so it worked. What was that movie? Not Serenity. What was the other terrible film we watched recently?
The Keanu one?
Yeah. What was the Keanu one?
Replicants.
Yeah, it was the same thing with that, where it's just like that movie tried to be smart and was terrible. And Pet Sematary, ironically enough, one of its best facets was that it wasn't particularly intelligent and it wasn't particularly philosophical. It just stuck to the tropes and just went with them.
Sadly enough, just as a quick shout out, I feel like we're gonna shit on a lot of bad movie reviews that we've done this year. So I'm just gonna let the rest of the audience know that I apologize, but I'm sorry, not sorry. Because
What do you mean apologize? They're
sorry,
terrible
not sorry.
films. They're terrible
Yeah,
films.
I know, but it's one of the things at which, like, at that time, we were like, I don't understand why they can't do it. New movies, why are you fucking up? And this movie comes out, and they did it. You know, I'm not saying this movie is perfect by any means, but at least takes those horror tropes and kind of rolls with it and kind of knows at least what movie it's trying to be, and not trying to be something more and trying to wow us. Serenity replicas, what the fuck are you doing? Trying to wow us with this whole new original idea, right? We already know what this is going to be. This changes. You know, there's a whole conversation we'll have later about the differences in originally from the original. And so I at least like the fact that they give us a lot of this stereotypical stuff that I can have like some serious eye rolls, but it didn't make it seem as cheesy or bad.
Yeah, it's like Taco Bell. I mean, you know what's coming, you know what's going to happen, but you get it anyway because you appreciate the value of it.
You should probably always go into a movie expecting to shit and then be pleasantly surprised when it's not shitty.
Cool. I just declined Taco Bell last night. I was really sad. Yeah, Mocha?
All you need to do is eat an entire tub of popcorn to yourself, then you don't have to worry about shit for a few days. Secondly, I hear what you're saying, Warren, about like appreciating a movie that knows what it is and doesn't try to be more. But I feel like that is inexcusable when it's a remake of a movie, because something came before it that and we all know what that is. So it needs to be
for sure
more.
But and I think we'll talk about this later. There was a point in which the directors of this movie actually went to Stephen King and said, "This is our vision." So they rewrote what they were originally doing. Stephen King knew, was like, "Yeah, I'll give the go ahead, and that's okay." So he already knew they were changing the story. And so
Stephen King gives the go ahead to everything. You saw
yeah,
Dark
Stephen
Tower.
King agrees to every. He doesn't care at all about his adaptations.
For sure. And so that's why I don't know. I don't know if I can call it. I guess if I said a remake, I guess it's just another adaptation. Right? When we talked about Dumbo just last week, and we talked about Ready Player One also, I guess it's a different retelling. It's a different adaptation, and that's something I like, instead of trying to do Dark Tower. We talked about that years ago. Let's not re-shit on that movie.
I want to see Dumbo after he's buried in the Pet Cemetery.
Honestly,
just flying around.
He'd probably
killing
be
people.
visually better looking.
Yeah, that movie was trash.
Yeah,
but
total waste of Idris
But
Elba.
honestly, teaser alert for my conclusion.
Dark Tower. Idris Elba was Dumbo's voice. What?
Idris Elba played Colin.
No, Idris Elba was Danny DeVito.
Oh,
Okay.
Jesus.
Sorry,
I actually thought that
what'd you say?
I was gonna say that teaser alert for my conclusion, but I go into that definitely.
Me too. I wrote that down. I think you just copied
Great
what I
teaser.
wrote.
We're teasing it.
Brylan, what else you got for acting and characters?
I would say the actor that really stood out for me was Amy Semmett as Rachel. I thought she was fantastic as the wife. Definitely still very tropey Stephen King-ish character. But I love what they did with her sister and her like nightmare vision of her sister in the accident. That it feels like its own horror story happening within this horror story. And I think that she sold that really well, that she is terrified at a lot of things in life. And you can definitely be understanding of it because of how serious the trauma of her sister dying has actually impacted her life. And it's really good to see that it carries over when she's very protective of her kids, except when they get close to the street. And
Man, that fucking truck going 90 miles per hour. Come on.
That truck. I mean, that's one of my favorite characters too. Was that truck?
Is it the truck from Maximum Overdrive?
The truck carrying cargo
yes.
of literal foreshadowing.
But yeah, I thought she did really well with what she had to work with, and I thought it was really neat how especially how they approached the trauma that she had with her sister, and just those flashbacks definitely worked really well for her character for me.
Honestly, so when I was watching that, I thought that could have made a really great short film. Like a half hour to 45 minutes of her just alone with her sister. That would have been terrifying. You know, like when she's like preparing the meal, she's all you hear is like auditory cues, you know?
Oh, that dragging and stuff. Oh my God.
Yep. So I thought that was a really cool self-contained storyline that it almost felt out of place because it distracted me from the main story. Like I just wanted to know more about that particular incident than what was happening out in the woods.
That's one of my biggest issues with this movie was that there were a bunch of individual things that were pretty cool, but like a lot of it didn't make sense to the overall story. Like there seemed to be a haunted house element that really had nothing to do with anything except for providing opportunities for jump scares. And each of those elements on their own were all cool, but should have been their own focuses, not just like thrown in to have more opportunities to like scare the, jumpy people in the audience.
And the thing that I'm kind of bummed about, and all of this is I felt like they chose to have that in that movie because that what was in the original, and they didn't need it. If they already changing things in this movie, change it so that you take some of that stuff out, because you're putting in so many other things, almost as if that he's creating this whole universe, right? He's already done this years ago. We don't need you to try to redo that again, right? Just make it simple, like make it smaller. I like what they were kind of going with it, but it also didn't make any sense overall throughout the story.
And it was a short movie, like it was one of those things that like, hey, I don't recommend this because to me it felt like it paced out well, but like adding 20 minutes. You're still at 2 hours. It's not an especially long movie at 2 hours. But you have 20 minutes more that you can play with Rachel's backstory. You can play with like extra time out in the pet cemetery. Again, I think it was paced very well, but it was very short. And so like those little snippets that we got should have been developed into their own thing rather than just like, allusions to.
Yeah. I hear you. It just didn't make a lot more. It didn't make a lot of sense. What we were talking about, it just didn't make a lot of sense. And when I talk and I look back and I watch the original movie, it also didn't make sense. So I was like, why? Then why would you make that choice? I agree with you on there. But going back to kind of Brylan's point, I really wish that we actually got a little bit more from Rachel's character. I felt like we got a little bit, but sadly, a lot of the stuff that I liked was she was already being stabbed and dying. So I was like, well, that sucks. Like I actually enjoyed at least what her character was, being moved away from the city of Boston to some more outskirts, kind of random place in Maine, right? And like there was some reason for that, and there's something like there's some weight that she has to be kind of living with. It could have literally just been left that she's living with some weight, and it could have been sort of mysterious. But a lot of the time that she was pushed to the side, which is a bummer. She still was heavily featured in this film, a lot more than the original, so I'm glad about that. But I feel like at least they could have made her a bit more into a real person, because they did,
You know,
and they kind of followed more of just Jason Clarke's character.
one of my biggest issues with this movie overall was the fact that despite having only like 5 main characters total, there was a surprisingly small amount of character development. And I like the mom's character, I think, was one of the biggest examples of where this was a miss, because we did get the development that, okay, she has issues with death, she is overprotective of her children, and she has this traumatic experience from when she was young. And also the notion that between the two of them, she's the one who believes in an afterlife. So the fact that we didn't get a chance to explore whatsoever what her reaction, thought process, and dialogue was when she saw her daughter return from the dead, and we just got her chased and then immediately killed, is a huge missed opportunity. They built up this notion that she was the one who was championing the afterlife as a positive. Why didn't we get to see that resolve at all before she got stabbed? A big missed opportunity.
Yeah. I'm curious, Mocha. I'm going to actually circle back to that a little bit later on, because I'd like to explore that idea a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Brylan?
Other actor I thought was really good was, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Jete Lawrence was as Ellie. She was a really good kid actor. I thought her change from precociousness to demonic went really well. So I found that she did a great enough job to make me convinced that, yeah, this is a good little kid that now just wants to murder and maim and kill. So great job by her. And other thing I've mentioned is John Lithgow basically did John Lithgow throughout this whole movie. If you've seen one John Lithgow character, you've seen them all. And that's how I felt about his character in this. I think the big miss with his character is he needed someone to play off with. I think it would be smart if they actually started with Nora being alive and not already dead in the movie.
Mm.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed / kind of laughing because John Lithgow was recently in a show that he played Winston Churchill, right?
Oh yeah, and it was fantastic.
And there was a Winston Churchill cat. And I was like, in this movie.
I saw that.
He knows who that is.
Yeah, but it didn't seem like he added anything. It just felt like he was just
there.
He
was exposition guy.
Yeah, and it was kind of a bummer.
Things back to life. It's bad. It's scary. You have the warnings from the old wise man. Let's do it anyway.
Yeah, I know.
It's like any Stephen King movie from.
Well, that's what's a bummer about it too, is that Fred Gwynn in the original movie from '89 is like the archetypal, like, oh no, you ought not to go down that road. Like he's that guy who just he has like the thick Maine accent. He's the guy that they make fun of on South Park. He just sits by his farm and he's like, oh no, you don't want to go over there. That's bad news if you go over that way. You don't want to go down that road. And like that's what he sounds like in the original movie. And he's totally like wacky and creepy and weird. And like John Lithgow is kind of like friendly Uncle Grandpa. Like,
but I at least enjoy what they were trying to do with John Lithgow and like having a friendship and kind of relationship between him and Ellie, because when Ellie comes back to kill him, it makes it a little bit more impactful. But the reasonings behind why John Lithgow's character Judd, I know I was like calling him John, I know why Judd was doing this. His motivations to do it just didn't make any sense in this movie. Like, you already know, bro, bad shit's gonna happen. There's no point in you telling them to do this bad shit. You know some shit's gonna go down and you're probably gonna end up dead. So why would you continue to do that? So it's kind of a bit of a bummer. And I at least like the explanation a lot more in the book, in the movie, in the original movie, than what we got here.
Yeah, I think in the book it's just kind of like he did have that bad story and things went south and stuff, which was more than just a dog coming back.
Yeah, well, in the book, Jason Clarke's character, I can't remember his name, Lewis. Lewis saves his wife's life from have a heart attack, and so he saves her life and to try to kind of pay him back. That's when Churchill cat actually died right after. So he's like, oh shit, like, well, I at least want to repay you for something. So I'm gonna tell you to bury your cat in this graveyard, but be careful. No.
Well, what were they hinting at?
That makes a lot more sense than like, oh, she seems nice and I don't want to disappoint her. You know,
Yeah.
it's almost like
Yeah, I
a
don't wanna
life for
hurt
life
her.
type thing.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my dog came back and it was so violent. My dad had to shoot in the face. But I just want your daughter to be happy. So-
Yeah, right?
Well, and also compared to the book, wasn't it? There was a person who came back, right? And they
Correct.
like murdered half the town.
Teddy's something. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
forget it too.
The
But
Vietnam vet that they hint at in the internet scene.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And then, but like, what about the part where so Ellie's about to gank John Lithgow, and she turns into his ex or his dead wife, and he says like, you know what you did, something terrible to me, and like it implies that he did something to his wife, but that's never resolved. Like it's just
No.
kind of hanging there. Like
well,
what is she?
that's not
implying?
even
Yeah.
hinted at beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was still alive in the original story in the movie,
yeah.
and she died. I don't know, but it was
Well,
kind of
and
weird.
also that's speaking of like a missed opportunity. Like that's kind of cool that the implied demonic structure of persons being brought back to life, where they can kind of switch into different people to talk about, you know, their quote unquote sins. Like
Mhm.
they didn't do that. That would have been sick if when Rachel got murked, you know, her sister's face came out. Instead,
Yeah.
it was just, you know,
Yeah.
mommy. Like, it
Yeah,
would have been
but-
cool if the individual, like, demons, quote unquote, were present in the murder scenes.
Yeah,
But
there's no
I
real
feel
rule
like-
set for what
Yeah,
they can do or what's like
exactly.
going on. Yeah.
There's too
Wendigo
many.
doesn't roll
There's
like
too
that.
many supernatural that
Ah,
you're introducing in
get me
this
started.
movie. Like you have to choose or like control yourself to only a couple of different supernaturals. We got the undead. We got the hearing of the voices. We have so many things that they were trying to like check a bunch of boxes off, like those tropes that we were talking about. Like, bro, you don't need to check all the boxes. Just check some of them, and we'll be okay with being able to have our imagination fill in the rest.
Well, I can remember, was the Wendigo in the 89 movie or mentioned in the 89 movie?
So, Caroline,
I don't remember.
she said that the Wendigo was a huge part of at least the books. I don't think she's seen the movie, but it was like
Yeah, it would
huge,
make sense that it's in the
huge
book.
part of the
Stephen King would
book.
totally be all over that in the books, but I don't think it had anything to do with the original movie. But I feel
What's
like
a Wendigo?
it's like a Native
Evil
American
Native
shape-shifting.
Americans.
Oh,
Yeah.
so this was hinted at in. Oh fuck, I can't remember which movie now. Yeah, it was hinted at in both movies though,
There's-
or at least
There was a
Was it the
movie
new
called
one?
The Ritual.
Yeah, that's really that's a
That
good
was a Wendigo.
That
And
wasn't
was
a Wendigo,
That was
was
a
it?
better Wendigo.
where was this was this in the original movie or the new movie that they brought this up? This was a thing.
It was in the
one
new
of the
movie.
Okay,
The thing
Okay.
growling in the woods that you never see, that doesn't really have any like there's no reason it's there. It's just like, oh, here's a Native American like myth that we can toss in the mix.
got it.
Like it didn't really bring anything together for me, at least.
Although apparently it was a big thing in the books. So like it didn't make any sense in the movie, but it made a lot. They only wrote it in the movie because it was something from the books.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I don't mind them doing some of this stuff because we know that Massachusetts is creepy as hell. I mean, fucking tons of white people, right? So I understand that, but
True.
at the
It's
same
true.
time, it's true. It's true.
A lot of white people.
But at the same time, you don't have to do everything. We know that there's like witches, supernatural. I know and I understand that it felt like Stephen King at this time was building this weird, crazy fucking universe with all these horror creatures and things that was happening in New England, Massachusetts area. But when after a point, you can't keep doing that, right? You have to kind of change it up or kind of make it a bit more pointed
Yeah.
to only
This-
certain things.
This movie had an hour and 40 minutes to tell its story, and it spent a solid like 10 to 15 of it like talking about the Wendigo, glancing the Wendigo from a distance, and like showing like interesting camera angles of feet moving through surprisingly clear swamp water. I feel like there was a lot of stuff that they didn't need to put in this movie at all, and they could have just like used that time to focus more on the 5 characters.
For sure. So I'll move on to Abbott. Abbott, talk to me a little bit more about the actors and characters. What you got?
Yeah, for me, I think you know, the two main characters that were sort of settled on in the beginning is the mom and the dad. I think for me, their acting was very standard for horror movies nowadays. I feel like if you swap them out with Ed and Lorraine Warren from the Conjuring films, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's the same sort of arc. It's the same kind of acting. It's the same tone. and I'm kind of getting sick of it, honestly. I think, again, the guy who was the creepy neighbor in the original was way better than John Lithgow. I think the cat really stood out for me. I love animal actors better than I love children actors. Although the girl in this movie, the little girl, did do a great job of switching between like being the cute, adorable little ballerina daughter and like the creepy undead daughter towards the end. But one thing that really stood out for me.
Fucking shit up is great.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's like, why did you put the dress back on? She's like, well, fucking zombie ballerina. What do you want me to do? But what really stood out for me was the ghost. The ghost, like, is more of a character in the original movie, and he actually kind of has an effect, and he's seen by everyone, like, not just kind of glimpsed by the baby, and not just, you know, affecting the dad. Like, there's a lot of overlap in the ghost scenes initially, like how they're portrayed in the original and how they're portrayed in this, very similar. But then the further we get into the movie, the more he just kind of fades into the distance, and he's just a voice. And it sucks because a lot of the makeup that they do for that character is great. Like, especially the part where like his brain is out.
I can see
You
his brain.
I mean,
yeah.
damn, like what type of car accident was that? I mean,
Well, they say
he got
he got dragged.
He got hit by
dragged?
he got hit by the
Yeah.
truck. He got
He
dragged.
got hit by the truck.
oh, he
and
got hit
dragged.
by one of the trucks. Okay.
I don't think he
I
actually.
must
I
have
don't think that was
missed
confirmed.
that.
I think no.
Well, he got
Well,
hit on
no,
campus.
Here's
I don't think
something,
that truck's
though.
going around
Because they
campus.
said it was
Let's
like a
look-
car accident on campus. I was like, all right, what car accident? Where
That,
like happened?
that truck is going 120 miles an hour literally everywhere in this town.
Yeah.
Zero
And
every stop
Ellie like gets hit by a tanker truck, and it's like a little trickle of blood on the ladder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it must have been
really
like
good
the
though.
typical
These-
college, like someone's 99 Saturn.
Mile an hour.
Well, everyone knows that little girls are filled with significantly less blood than 20-year-old men.
Not gonna touch that
That's it.
one.
Oh my gosh,
Just
it was so.
acknowledge quick. Let's just acknowledge really quick that there was one black dude in this movie, and they literally brought him in just to die immediately.
The first one to die.
The one
first one
black
to die.
dude, they bring him in just to die. There was also a Latina nurse, which is another nice little stereotype niche they filled out. So of the two people of color, one was a black dude, and they brought him in to die. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that I mean, so
Well,
the ghost that you're talking about, Abbott, was Victor Pascal.
Yep.
And
Was he
I
the guy
felt
from Captain Phillips?
No, I
Oh,
thought that
come
too. I was
on.
waiting for him to
Oh,
come up and be like, I am
come
the ghost
on,
now.
hold on,
No,
come
I'm
on,
serious. I'm serious.
There were a couple
I
scenes
thought that
where I
was
thought it
him.
was him.
No.
I'm not.
He looks
even gonna-
kind of like him.
I'm gonna keep.
No.
No, he doesn't.
No,
I'm
no,
gonna
he
keep
doesn't.
going. I'm gonna keep going and say that Abbott, your point is the ghost showed up almost all of the time in the original movie, and it got to the point where he was actually kind of cracking a couple jokes, and I'm like, what the fuck kind of movie am I in right now?
Because
Like,
it's an
what?
80s horror movie.
Oh
That's
my-
standard.
Ugh.
It's like,
Yeah.
have you ever seen American Werewolf in London?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have,
Yeah,
actually.
it's like that. It's like
Yeah.
like that movie was so perfect, the original, because it had the entire 80s and all the great horror that came out in the 80s to like steal from. Where this movie like tries to be that movie, and then like you said, they tried to do their own thing, and it's just like you can sort of see that. Like the ghost is the perfect metaphor because he's there, and then there's that one scene where he does kind of disappear, and then he's just a voice, and it's like, why did you do this? He's not. He only says like 5 things, and none of them are helpful at all.
Again, this made a lot more sense in the movie when the ghost literally comes back to try to help Lewis and said, "Hey, I was injured. You helped me out, and it didn't work. So I'm coming back to at least tell you not to go because the ground is sour." It made a lot more sense. In this movie, they kind of tried to do that, but we don't understand exactly why the ghost is seemingly just haunting
Yeah.
Lewis' character. But then Lewis is the only person, right? Am I incorrect here? That
The
Lewis is
kid,
only
the baby
person-
kid sees it.
Oh, Gage. Okay.
Yeah.
So Gage can see the kid, can see Victor, and Lewis can see Victor, but that was like it. And it didn't also make a lot of sense because we look at a bit of a comparison. Not everybody, but at least the Rachel's character saw the ghost probably the most by
Yeah.
far in the
Yep.
original movie. And what Mocha's point was kind of made a lot more sense. She was the only person at that time, at least that we know, she believed in, a bit more of like afterlife, right? At least we know Lewis knows, well, you just die and that's it from his scientific blah, blah, blah. She was the only person that at least believed in the afterlife. So it makes a bit more sense why she's a little bit more susceptible to kind of communicating with that. And I can understand it fully why in the original film that's why the ghost kind of following her because she has more of an affinity to it. I just don't get why they just kind of removed it in this particular kind of movie to the point where the ghost doesn't even talk to Rachel at all. So I just thought that was a little weird.
Well, that's actually a good point. The way that you said that, I think that what would have been an even more interesting dynamic if they wanted to change it up a bit further to make it their own is I think that if they had swapped not necessarily the entire roles, but if Rachel had been the one to be involved in the whole, like Rachel had befriended Judd, and then she had been the one to discover the mound, and then because she seems more invested in her children, honestly. Like I don't feel like he. The dad definitely loved his kids, but I didn't feel his panic as much as I felt the mother's. And I feel like also mirroring what you were saying about her susceptibility to belief in the afterlife, she would have been more so adjusted to believe what Judd had said and like be at grips with, okay, yeah, people can come back from the dead. Whereas the doctor straight-laced dad guy would have been the one to be very standoffish. Because if you watch as much dumb ghost haunting like real reality TV bullshit as I do, it's always the husband who's like, whoa, we're not moving out of this house. Ghosts don't exist. And it's always the wife who is like attuned and can like know that there's ghosts in the house. So that would have made more sense for me, and that would have been a more successful as a remake for me.
Even going off of that point, just another tidbit, right? They even mentioned to the fact that Rachel's a stay-at-home mother, so she's always with the kids.
Yeah,
always. And Lewis is not, and the reason why they moved to this place is so he can have more time. So already we know that Rachel has a closer relationship with both of the children.
Yeah,
and so she's probably gonna be a bit more. I think her that would make more sense why she should be the one that's doing all that stuff that you were talking about, Abbott. I agree with you.
To be fair, I think the way that I took it from that one scene where she's like, "Oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom," was that she didn't have a job.
Did she have a scene where she specifically says, "Oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom"?
Yeah, when they're in the bed together. It was maybe not like that exact thing, but like she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna stay home," and the way I interpreted that scene was that she had something in Boston. They moved out. You know, one person got a job, the other one was just like, "All right, I'm gonna stay at home."
She's still looking.
Right.
Yeah.
Take care of the kids, and then when I find a job, I'll find a job. The other thing
or it's
is
her
that,
version of sexy pillow talk. So
right, yeah. I mean, it definitely turned him on. So you know,
Ooh, I'm so unemployed. I don't have health benefits.
Do me like I have a job.
Oh, what's a 401k? But the other thing is that I think that they wrote themselves. They had like they had a kind of like a pie chart, and once they filled everyone's pie chart with creepy things, they decided to go to the next person with the creepy things. So I think that they couldn't have given her both the sister dying storyline and the I see ghosts all the time storyline. Because you're right. I think the characterization, and this jives with what I saw earlier, what I said earlier with like that sister storyline should have been its own story, its own movie. But I think that because they wrote so much interesting weird stuff for the wife, if they also made her attuned to ghosts and like having the whole supernatural debate about ghosts in the afterlife, it would have been too much for one character who's not truthfully your main character, and that wouldn't have worked.
But if she was the main character and they just made the dad like the side piece, who was just there to be a foil saying like, I don't believe in God or the afterlife, I think it could have worked actually really well and would have been a nice way to turn things on its head.
Well, yeah, because you could have, I mean, at that point, it would have made more sense when the whole thing about, like, the sister suffering in hell because of, some disease and, like, the way she was treated, that would have hit way harder if, the wife was like, oh my God, like, I believed in this. So you're definitely right there. But I think that was the reason that they didn't do it, was just to break up who got what supernatural.
You know who should have played the creepy neighbor? Stephen
Wilson?
King.
Oh, damn it.
That was actually pretty cool.
I thought you were going to say Wilson. Next door. Blew it. What you got?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I want to reiterate, because I think most of the things on characters has already been said, but Ellie playing two separate characters, Her as the freaky child was at the end there was phenomenal. Usually, I feel like the Down in Front podcast really shits on kids actors, like
Thank
all
you.
the time.
Isolate that audio. Isolate
Yeah,
that audio.
yeah. Have you
What?
ever seen Dreamcatchers?
I know
No,
for a
we-
fact Jesse Rand does.
Shut up! You taking away my. So if you want to check us out for more details, Jesse Rand shits on kids
.com.
at ymail.com. No, but I think that we do a healthy amount of critiquing on child acting, let's say, and child directing. But Ellie was good from literally no one. I've never heard of her before. And she really killed it, especially that transition to the evil demon child.
I like you said. So we've already started talking about the comparisons to the original movie. So we're gonna go continue to kind of talk about this. The one thing I do want to kind of mention up front, especially if people don't necessarily know, especially everybody listening, was a couple of the biggest changes in the movie. From the original movie, they actually kills Gage. And so Gage actually gets hit by the actual truck when he's trying to fly a kite. He just runs off, gets hit by the truck. There's also only a little bit of blood in the sneaker there, so I guess that's some continuity. Whatever. They wanted to make sure only a little bit of blood
You
is shown.
can't show kids being split in half by tanker trucks.
He just turns into ketchup. Yeah.
Well, because I'm like, hold up, if that is going, I think it was 65 miles per hour. We actually saw the speedometer in the old movie.
If a truck going east at
Yeah, you did
55
the
miles an
math.
hour hits a little girl standing still at 0 miles an hour.
That little girl's turning to dust, so I can care less what's happening. But at least that cat will be in multiple pieces. There's no way that cat will be in one kind of cohesive unit. So no way. But the biggest change was from the original movie and the story. Gage was killed, and Gage comes back and then wreaks havoc on everybody else. In this movie, it was a huge change because they killed Ellie and they made it seem like it was oh, gotcha, like psych, because we thought Gage was gonna die and Gage was saved, but Ellie ended up being killed by the tanker truck, like detaching and hitting her in the head and I guess killing her on her birthday. So I thought that was also really impactful. So I did a little bit of digging and saw that the director changed the story because he had 3 daughters and he felt as though he had more of a connection with his daughters than because he doesn't have a son. So he really wanted to change, and this is true. And I'm like, that's a weird reason to change it, but whatever. So he changed it because he had daughters and he had a closer connection with his daughters because he didn't have a son. So that was literally one of the reasons why they ended up killing off Ellie instead of Gage. I'm really glad they made that change because I felt watching the original movie now, is super comical because
So good though.
you have like a 5-year-old that's like trying to kill people. I'm like,
didn't even know how to talk yet. So
well, that's the same, and that was
That'd
the
have been
thing that I'm
weird.
really glad. Yeah, so it was almost very similar to the original, right? The Gage knew how to talk in the original movie, but it still comes off as being weird. I'm like, that's not creepy. That's just weird for me at all.
Michael
And
Myers and Jason never say a goddamn thing.
Yeah, but he's also a grown ass man. He's not
You don't
like
know
a
that?
5-year-old. Yeah, I do know that. He's a grown ass man. So that was the biggest thing I did want to kind of mention. There's a lot of other changes that they have from the original movie to the new movie. So I definitely want to kind of get into that. I'll toss it a little bit more over to Brylan here.
yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, like I haven't read the book or seen the original movie in quite a long time, and like Pet Cemetery for me is it comes over as one of those like more solid like Stephen King horror stories that is like the standards. So like other movies you could think of are like Firestarter or Christine or Cujo. They all follow this like pattern of horror that Stephen King defined for himself, and Pet Cemetery just follows that as well. So are we going to get like some, I mean, there's a moment in this movie where like you can see, okay, if Rachel was a more concerned parent, she would just call the city hall and had stop signs put in the road, or speed limits. No, that doesn't happen. So because these characters won't go to that logical conclusion, you got to have that mystery and you got to create this horror suspense. But I think there's a lot of things that actually work really well for the horror. Like probably the best thing I like about this movie is how they did the sound work. So every time that truck sped by the house and everything, I did jump a little bit. They were changing it up just a little bit where it still catches you off guard every time. I also liked just the sound work they did with like Rachel's sister, where she is dragging herself along the floor, and it's just this very creepy sound and everything. And that scene where she gets into the dumbwaiter, why would she crawl inside the dumbwaiter? I don't know. But when she gets in the dumbwaiter and it falls and crashes, that sound is so disturbing. And just opening up and seeing her crumpled body in there is horrific. I really like that they treat her sister's condition as kind of like a scary monster. Like when we see her in her bed, that it's not just like, oh, a twisted spine or anything. There's like this wetness to it. It's actually super gnarled and everything. The way they actually film it, it makes it look very grotesque and something to be afraid of. And so I did really appreciate that they made it where it's not like we're trying to actually take it as the rationale of having to deal with a horrific medical condition with a loved one, that it's more of like, this is how I remember it because it scared the shit out of me. And I did also like, I mean, Victor's accident, even though it's, I mean, this must be the most horrific car accident of all time, but there's some subtle nuances they do with that makeup and everything. Like his head doesn't automatically start squirting blood, but when it's turned the right way, it just shoots out this huge ass stream of blood, and you're just like thrown off by like, oh shit, this guy is dying in about 5 seconds. How are you going to save him? But I thought that it actually executed on like those classic horror movie tropes very well, and I was actually entertained and captivated, and also it did grab me a couple times and actually make me jump a little bit out of my seat, especially with like the sound and just the visuals they did for the horror as well.
One more thing on the sound there. Did anyone catch the first drive-through in the truck? What the leading sound was?
No.
Cat's meow.
No. So I mean, on its that was a good guess though. On its basis, there's a couple parts of sound, right? There's the attack phase and then there's the release phase. What is it? ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release is like the big one. But like to me,
Who's reading his like plans to invade Poland?
Alpha, Delta. But like, so for me, there's only two sections, right? There's the attack phase, which is the first, 10 to 20 milliseconds of what the sound you're hearing is, and there's the release phase, which is everything after that. The truck had a bear. At least some bigger animal. So the first time that you see the truck, that is a very large carnivore. That is the leading sound, and then has a truck as the tail. And they do this several times. I'm trying to think of it because like I should have wrote them down because I can't remember now. But specifically, I think one time when they're in the cemetery, there's a filtered, delayed version of I think like a cat, meowing, just like or like screeching. It's not like a normal meow, but where they pan it from side to side. So to Brown's point, the composer took a conscious effort to take animal sounds, warp them into unlistenable aspects, and then reinterpret them back into the film score and to the sound effects of this. And it's all throughout the movie. There's plenty of times where it's like, well, this is not a violin. This is a whatever animal yelling for whatever reason. that is now playing the melody of your music, that is now taking the lead on the sound effect that's going on in that. It was freaking brilliant. Like, I mean, it's not that hard of a thing to do. It's like, the film's called Pet Sematary and you have a bunch of animal noises in it. But to intelligently interpret those sounds and put them into the score and the film, the sound effects was pretty commendable.
Yeah. I also like, oh, Mocha, did you want to mention something?
I was just gonna say that I love having Blewett on this podcast.
I mean, some of the other visuals I liked were I like the whole thing with the kids with the drum beats and the creepy mask and like the homemade masks they have for their pets and everything. And even though it looks like, oh, this is just like the perfect beginning of a scary movie, having these creepy kids and creepy masks just march into the forest. I mean, if I was like a rational parent, I would probably see these kids like, first off, I was like, what are you doing on my property? Secondly, I would go to their parents and say things like, you know what, your kids are pretty disturbed. They're wearing these crazy ass masks. But I think the visual worked really well just to kind of set a sense of tone and everything. They do a really good job of like slowly building tension up to the point where all hell breaks loose, which I thought was really done well. I would say like the weakest part of this is the ending. I think it's the weakest of the three endings that are in the book and the other movies. I went on the ye old Cliff Notes and freshened up on on what the book ending and the original movie ending was. And I think I appreciate the book ending more, just kind of leaves it open and Rachel just comes back and puts her hand on Lewis's shoulder and that's the end of it. Yeah. I didn't like this one where it's kind of like, oh, family zombie apocalypse time to rock and roll and kill the whole town. And the way they're just like creeping on Gage and his dad is creeping through the window, Rachel's creeping on him, his sister's creeping on him, church is creeping on him.
It ends with the sound of like the car unlocking. I was like,
yeah.
Okay.
I was just waiting for Gage to like just, even though he's been the mute 4-year-old through the whole movie, he actually turns the car keys and floors it. I thought that would be hilarious.
That would be great.
A fun thing about the car unlock sound, it was initially a screech of a pterodactyl that then transforms into the car beep. Little known fact there.
It's true. They did record the pterodactyl only in the prehistoric times.
Yeah, but I thought
it was buried in the cemetery.
I thought the zombie family conclusion was a little too cartoony for what the movie was.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I just have to switch it up. I didn't mind the zombie family more so than I mind the ending of the original movie. I think the book ending was by far the best because it ends off on a official cliffhanger. Touches his shoulder, says, "Darling, we have no idea what's going to happen at that point." And the movie, kind of similar. This was shortly after, on the heels of Lewis sticking a lethal injection in his son's neck, and the Gage walks away and says, "Not fair." Crashes into a wall and then like falls down and then gets burned alive. I'm like, what kind of ending?
The only way to get rid of babies.
What? Yeah, so the original movie ending, I was like,
that just gave me flashbacks. I remember that. Not fair.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
It's so good.
So
it's so good.
It's a crazy ending. But the fact that it doesn't really explain how Gage was able to lynch Rachel from a random ceiling in Judd's house. The ending of the original movie is a fucking mess. So I'm like, No way. I didn't like anything about that at all. So I appreciate that they've done something that made a little bit more sense realistically in this new movie, and they kind of also made it like twisted on his head to actually kill Lewis, because I felt like Lewis needs to die from all the dumb shit that he'd done in this movie. So I'm like, you kind of need to die. And this was the only movie, at least, that they actually kill him, right? This is the only work that he dies. We don't quite know. I mean, I guess we kind of know that he dies when Rachel picks up the knife, and we actually just hear sounds in the original movie, but the book, we don't know that he dies or not. So I kind of agree with you there.
I just have to say, like, when Rachel spears Lewis in the back, all of a sudden, like, they do that so well of how abrupt it is.
Oh
It
yeah.
just
Oh,
like
yeah.
shoots out of his chest. It's done so well.
You almost
And
didn't know who you were rooting for in that scene too. You're like, oh, am I rooting for like the 7-year-old kid who?
No.
Nope.
No, you're rooting for Lewis. What do you mean you have no idea?
you
What's wrong with
root
you?
for the dead people.
Never root
Am I
for
rooting
children.
for the
No,
demon who
I'm
just
s-
killed like 3 people?
I'm like slightly rooting for like the kid. Like that's kind of messed up. Like some adults just beating the hell out of his daughter.
I'll say this
But,
about the ending of the movie. It like I didn't understand what they were trying to do with it. Like when the movie ended and I realized the ending, I was like, what story were you trying to tell here? And I'm a big fan, mind you, of unhappy endings in movies. I love it when like the main character actually loses or you're left off realizing that it's not completely over yet, whatever. But I just don't know. I just don't get what they were trying to do, what story they were trying to tell with that ending.
They were trying to pull like an ending like Darabont's Mist. They were trying to give you that like, oh well,
that
now they're just gonna
depressing
kill the
ending.
baby. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Too
well, I
easy
mean,
to
one
trust.
other thing about the visuals I thought was actually stunning was it also is like one of the moments I remember most in the original movie was when Judd's Achilles gets stabbed on the stairwell. And I think it's just as visceral in this one, if not more. And I don't know, maybe I have some type of inherent fear of sports injuries, but just anything like having to deal with the Achilles tendon just like bothers me for some reason.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
too much.
That was by far one of the grossest things I've seen in a long time. I was like, oh Jesus.
Oh, because you see it separate too.
Yeah.
It's actually really well done. Yeah.
Because in the old film, it was just like, okay, you just easily cut through. You can clearly see that was a prosthetic or that was clearly some sort of paper mache. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's really easy. In this one, I felt like it was kind of a stab and then like literally kind of slicing it open. I was like, oh my God. And then we actually see Ellie like going and continually stab Judd to even make it even more impactful, and the fucking creepy ass Winston just overlooking.
Maybe we should do a last call about our top like 5 movies where somebody gets their Achilles tendon cut, because it happens.
There's
like,
a lot
frequently, and it's always horrible. It's always horrible to watch.
We should. I'll be down. Jeez, that's a terrible Google search right there. Abbott, what you got for the comparison to the original? Anything
I
else?
think I wanted to basically compare it to being like the Zack Snyder cut of the original, because it's just it's this grim, dark, like modernized version of the movie. But then I think about how Zack Snyder's one and only good movie is his remake of Dawn of the Dead. So then I'm like, he can make good horror movies, and this wasn't a bad movie. I just think that they took like a movie that I enjoy from the 80s and modernized it for the aughts or whatever decade we're in right now. And I think that it does fall in line with a lot of like the standard movies that we have nowadays, like The Conjuring and the ongoing, like the Saw series, like all these ongoing, like regurgitated horror films. I think I'm seeing a lot of parallels between this and that, and they updated it. That's fair. It wasn't, in my opinion, the best Stephen King adaptation, but I think that one thing I did really enjoy about this movie is that they did sort of solidify that they are kind of just like the MCU and the DCU has their own thing. They are kind of leaning into a Stephen King universe, because if you paid close attention, there were things like they see Derry when they're rushing home, which is where it takes place. If you listen during Ellie's birthday, there's a woman who's talking about a rabid dog that killed a bunch of people in a town or two over, which is Cujo, which I think is rumored to be the next adaptation they're going to be remaking. And then one thing I caught that I want to research is that when Judd tells the dad about the trucks, he's like, "Oh yeah, it's those darn trucks from the something something company." I was like, "Oh, it's weird." Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that line. I didn't look it up, but I did at least look up and Google the name of the truck company. I couldn't find anything though.
It stood out to me. It sounded familiar, and I can't find anything about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's some other reference to a Stephen King novel or another movie, for example. Because another thing, I was reading some of the trivia on IMDb, is that like there's some there's some signs in the film, some realty signs that are for D Torrance, so like Danny Torrance Realty
Oh,
and things
cool.
like that, like little tiny things like that peppered throughout the film because it's like that Castle Rock did the same
Yeah.
sort of stuff, and I really appreciate that. So I think that's kind of neat if they are going to continue to either remake these adaptations or make new adaptations. I hope they all do tie in together, except for the Dark Tower. That can go.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Don't remake Dreamcatchers because that was like just the worst film ever.
Yeah.
Remake the Langoliers. This is the only thing I want to happen before I die.
They have to do The Stand.
Plain
They have to
eating
remake The
monsters.
Stand. Because if
The
they can,
Langoliers gave me my first existential break as a child. I remember this so clearly.
I
But
thought you were going to say
if time is
Langoliers gave you your
being
first boner.
No, yeah, watching a show about time being eaten fucked me up, and like it really messed with my head. It's probably why I'm so weird today.
Yeah.
But yeah, another thing that sort of took me out of it is whether or not you've seen the original or if this is your first foray into Pet Sematary. Some of the things that they included, like for example, I mentioned it before, the scene where he's actually searching the internet for things which wouldn't have been available in 1989. So that's why this wasn't a direct scene from the original. But in there, he glazes over like the bull story where a bull comes back to life and wanders through town. But then they mention the Vietnam vet, which up until that point, there hasn't been anything mentioned of the resurrection of people, which sort of ruins the surprise at the end when then like you get that idea once the kid dies. Like it doesn't occur to you like, oh, they're bringing back animals. But what if they try to bring back a person? I feel like including that article about the Vietnam vet, like the rumors of the Vietnam vet disappearing and insinuating that there was a person brought back, that kind of ruins it for this one. But yeah, I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's as good as the original. I still like the original a whole hell of a lot better because the concept is just so goofy. It just begs to be an 80s schlock movie. I don't think it really works as like a modern, creepy, dark horror movie.
I mean, the only thing I wanted to kind of add onto this is I just was confused why the original was so misogynistic and why there were so many lines in the original about men have, like, there was a literal line. This is from Judge was a problematic character all the way through and through. This dude is a terrible character, like at least what he believed in. But in the original movie, they kind of gave the women, or the woman, which is Rachel, nothing to do. They kind of give her the supernatural, or this thing that's haunting her, but other than that, she shows up at the exact moment, literally just to die. In the original film, and so I'm glad they kind of changed it up to have Ellie do something. I'm glad they kind of gave a bit more time with Rachel in this new film. I'm glad that they didn't necessarily talk about, well, the woman got scared while this Vietnam vet came back, so they had to call the men. And so the men had to come in, the men had to handle it. I'm like, what is this writing? This is the 1980s.
That's how
it's called
Stephen
the
King
80s.
writes.
Yeah,
come
it's
on.
the 80s,
Stephen King hoovers a bunch of nose schneef and then just writes
80s was the
about
last
what his dick
bastion
is
of the
feeling.
70s.
Yeah. I
That
mean, so
movie
it's,
bothers you. I got a movie called Zardoz you should watch.
I'm pretty sure those are hard R's all over the place.
Oh, let's review it. Let's review Zardoz.
That'd be
So
International Women's Day.
that's the only thing that's like right now, like there's no way you can sit and watch. Like, I guess here's my thing. Like, if I go back and rewatch, I guess this is from the 90s, but if I go back and rewatch it, or if I go back and rewatch a movie from like the 80s, it's still, I understand a lot of stuff is going to be campy and it's bad, but a lot of the dialogue isn't as glaring or offensive as the original Pet Sematary. And so that's like my issue of like, man, not only am I going to think a lot of this stuff is a joke, but who thought this was a good idea to put that in the movie or a book? Come on. So that's my only
People
sort of
weren't as
issue I have.
sensitive back then as they are now.
Well, it's not about if it's not about kind of being sensitive. It's just about the fact that there's women that when did Alien come out?
1981,
4?
82,
Early 80s.
Right?
or
Okay.
79 maybe.
Okay, so
79. Yeah, you're right. 79.
okay, so my
$1.
thing is that there are times in which women can be badasses. It's not all about men, and
Yeah.
there are a bunch of movies that have already come out around that time But then you still get movies like this. Like, okay, what the fuck? Like, you have a movie about a family, yet you literally are putting the wife just on the shelf the entire time. So that's the only reason why I just didn't like the original as much. It's just definitely not going to hold up. But I at least think, though, unfortunately, you kind of have to watch that Cliff Notes, Cliff Notes. I've never heard of that website before. Cliff Notes, the actual book, because nobody has time
Did
to
you
read.
go to high school in the late 2000s? How have you never heard of Cliff Notes?
Sorry?
Cliff's Notes, you mean? It's
I mean,
Cliff's
Internet
Notes
Cliff Notes
because it's a guy named
is-
Cliff taking notes.
Yeah, it's his notes. Yeah.
I thought the
That
guy
got
on the
me
cliff.
through high school English class. Is that
I'm
and
just
Spark
kidding.
Notes? Spark
Of
Notes.
course, I know. I'm just
Spark
kidding.
Notes.
Oh.
Well, I
Yeah,
feel
so-
okay.
Wikipedia.
I feel the same about this adaptation as I did about the Carrie remake.
Oh,
Carrie remake.
So I enjoyed
Rihanna
the
was in
Carrie
it?
remake, but the original is still better.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
They were
I
all
feel the
gonna
same
laugh
way
at
about
you.
these ones.
They were all going to laugh at you. That's a great line. So we're going to move into our conclusions, our final thoughts. We'll talk about, should we recommend this movie? And if we do recommend this movie, what other movies should you may see in order to get ready to watch Pet Sematary? I'll toss it over to Brylan.
Yeah. So, was this remake necessary? No. Does it suck? No. I think it's actually an enjoyable horror film that kind of like hits all those notes. If you had like check boxes of what makes a horror film, it hits about 80% of those. And I think that it is it's not going to like reinvigorate or innovate horror in any way. It's going to be what you expect a horror movie to be. So it's not going to be Us. It's not going to be It. But it is, as the kids say, basic, but in a good way. It's like if it's not that every pumpkin spice latte sucks. It's just like when someone makes a pumpkin spice latte really good, this is what it's like.
No, every pumpkin spice latte sucks. You were correct.
I mean, they do, but what if someone made one that you actually enjoyed?
I wouldn't know because I wouldn't drink it.
We'll need to force feed you a pumpkin
Well,
spice latte.
I mean, this is how this movie is. It's that thing that you don't really like, but they actually made it really well. So,
Force fed pumpkin spice latte? Is that what you're saying?
PSL is the name of my next horror film. But I would say, like, if there's like a Stephen King movie you should watch, I'm just always going to recommend my personal favorite, Deadly Friend, which is based on one of his short stories. It's got one of the best death scenes of all movie history in it.
Does it have anything to do with like an Achilles?
No, it has to deal with a basketball.
Oh, now I'm intrigued. I'm going to go to the YouTubes. Mocha, what you got?
Yeah, this movie, this remake it had a lot of potential, but it just fell short overall, I think. There was this really cool wave of momentum we had going from the last couple of recent Stephen King remakes, and somehow this movie just did not help push that wave forward in any sort of way. You're making faces, but was it not a great movie? I'm
thinking about the one before it.
Yeah. Like 2 months
speaking
before
about
that.
Netflix too, like was it Marie's Game or Something's Game on
Gerald's
Netflix?
Game.
That was Gerald's Game. Yeah, that was a solid remake too. So there have been some good ones.
We didn't review that.
Happened to Dark Tower.
I
don't care, Warren. I watch other things than what we review here.
What?
That being said, I felt like we had some good momentum going, and this movie missed out on it. Like Brian said, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just don't think that it's worth anyone's time. Don't bother with this movie, whether it's in theaters or at home streaming.
Did we review The Green Mile? Because that was a good one.
Yeah, but that's not Stephen King horror. That's more of his fantasy.
Is it not? That's
No.
horror to me. I want to get
It's
locked
Tom
up in
Hanks
jail.
having a
Nobody
3
wants to get
hour
locked
long
up in jail.
urinary tract infection.
That's the only thing you get from that movie. Abbott,
horror.
Abbott, please
E
continue.
hard.
I enjoyed it. I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but ultimately I do feel as a remake it's unnecessary. It doesn't stack up the way that like it was such a remarkable remake. But you should go check it out. It does tend to, like, if you're not a jump scare person, I do feel like this movie does rely way too heavily on jump scares, as a lot of modern horror does. So beware of that. But also, if you're getting ready for this, check out the original, because, like I said, I think the original is better. But also, if you're going to gear up for this movie, I think you should also watch Secret Life of Pets, Milo and Otis, Homeward Bound, The Aristocrats. No, The Aristocats. Very different movies.
Yes.
And then maybe All Dogs Go to Heaven.
One and two, or just one?
Just the first one.
There's no dogs in this movie.
Yeah, I know, but it'll still get you like in the mood for dead animals.
True.
No, the first dead animal was a dog. The one in the procession.
Oh, actually, maybe
Oh,
Frankenweenie.
yeah, that's right.
Frankenweenie would be a good one to watch.
That's
Also,
a great
Gage
movie.
is my dog, so I think that counts.
Oh, Gage is terrible in this movie.
Turner and Hooch.
The actor didn't know how to speak English, so
Did you say Marley and Me in that?
No,
Yes, Marley and Me can be in there. Yep.
I said Mackany.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Let's
What
just
about
keep
Morgan
going.
Don't bury
Mindy?
Mac in the pet
Association.
cemetery.
Did you also put
Alf?
what's that movie I hate with Keanu Reeves
Classy.
and his dog?
The
guys?
Matrix.
Old Yeller.
Bill and Ted.
John Wick.
John Wick. Thank you.
He's gonna have a horse in the new one.
Oh fucking!
Bury that horse.
Gonna ride his horse to
That
the
horse
old
better get
jungle.
hit by a semi truck.
A horse is just
Yes!
kind of like a really big weird dog.
Pretty much.
That song is
Uh,
fire.
Blew it. What do you got?
Besides Old Country Road being the greatest song I've ever heard in my entire
Old
life.
Town.
Fuck outta
Old
here.
Town Road.
Got
Yeah, I
my
don't even know.
horses in the back.
Yeah, this movie,
Tractor,
I think that it
sixty.
suffered from two things. First of all, it wasn't released in October or September. The second thing, it had Stephen King's name in the front of it. If this movie was completely absent from both of those things, not absent, I mean, it was released in October and didn't have Stephen King's name, it'd be the best horror film that you saw of that season. This movie had a lot going for it, but I can't stop speaking with a southern accent because of that Old Country Road reference we just made. That weirdly
Old
just
Town. You
affect-
don't even know the name of the.
I
Country Road is not
know.
the name
It's
of
so
the song.
fucked up. Like I started talking like
That
that. I'm
Old
like,
Town Buffet.
oh Jesus, I don't know what's going on there. But I think it's one of those things that like this movie was a very good horror film that should have been released in October and should not have been associated with Stephen King. Because I think we're viewing it through those lenses, right? We're viewing it through these like super interconnected like Stephen King universe, super creepy Stephen King universe, and also it's spring, so that means Jordan Peele's time to shine. So like it's if you compared it to the regular slog that comes out when Andrew Abbott's Fear Boners is normally in full production, this movie is incredible. Now, not so much.
Also,
Yeah.
I think they need to start implementing more Stanley-like cameos for Stephen King in his movies. He used to do it all the time, but he hasn't done it in the last few. He needs to do it again.
Yeah.
He should have played the cat.
Yeah.
I don't trust Stephen King near roads, though.
Yeah, good call.
It would have been great if Stephen King would have been Judd in this movie. I
Cool.
fully back that, or at least the truck driver. Some
Oh, there you go.
like that. Something that's weird that would have worked. That would have worked well.
Rachel.
Yeah. No, why stop there? Gage.
Every character, he just pull an Eddie Murphy with Stephen King.
This is the second
Yeah,
podcast.
Yeah, second
in
podcast
a
in a
row
row. That's
that
dope. That's so dope.
I don't know how that happens, but all right. Yeah, I like this movie. I think we talked a bit about it, and looking at movies like Ready Player One and Dumbo doesn't do an adaptation well at all. It just kind of shits on the original story. Where I think that this doesn't quite shit on the original story, but probably farts and some stuff comes out, But it's still at least entertaining. I liked it at least. I like the changes that they actually made. I think a lot of people are going to probably like the 2019 version much more than the 1989 version a lot. Besides like the modernization that they've done, besides the jump scares, I just felt like there was some scenes and some moments in the imagery and the sound and all these things that we talked about that, sure enough, made it a fairly enjoyable movie. I think it came out also at a correct time. Kind of agreeing with you, but kind of disagreeing with you, Blewett, because if this movie comes out in January, it's trash. If a movie comes out in February, March, and like April before the summer, that's probably the best time that a lot of other movies kind of get some traction and says, okay, cool, like this kind of comes out. Maybe later on we can come out in October or September, and then we can get even more popularity. So I think it came out in a good time, as that it's probably going to spend like maybe a couple weeks, maybe in theaters, and then probably fall off as it should, because summer blockbusters are all going to come.
Yeah.
So
Summer
I
starts
like
on
the
April
time.
26th now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So I
Before then,
like the time. No, I mean,
Shazam.
I think, no.
It
No,
did
that-
solid.
We'll
it's
get.
not a summer movie.
That's a teaser for
No.
next week.
That's the week after, actually.
Oh, my bad.
So, yeah, so I think it came out at a good time. I think a lot of people are going to like it. A lot of younger generation, a lot of younger people may also like it a bit more. But I enjoyed it. I would definitely go in and say, don't read the books. Don't go to Spark Notes or said Craig Notes, right? Don't go to Craig Notes. Don't go to Cliff Notes at all to kind of read the original story. Go in to watch this movie kind of blind, not because that's what I do, but I think you're going to enjoy this story much like Blewett was talking about, looking at it separately outside of the scope of everything else that's happening. After you watch this movie, then go back and look at that stuff, and then you can at least kind of have different buckets for it and have appreciation for each one of the mediums that it comes from. So definitely check that out. I think you'll enjoy it. I would also tell everybody, don't watch the original movie at all, because I hated that one, but that's just me. I also hate old people. So there you go. And with that, we are the Down in Front podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for joining. Senor Abbott, as our very special guest, where can people find more of your work on the interwebs?
They can definitely find more of me popping some fear boners on the Down in Front podcast from time to time. Our most recent episode, I believe, was the Leprechaun Returns episode for St. Patrick's Day, which was a fun one.
That was great.
The new movie was actually really good.
That was a good
So if you
episode.
haven't seen it, check that one out. And you can also find, we just vaginally rejuvenated the Kowalski Couch Collection. So if you search that hashtag on Instagram, you can see a bunch of our BFF Kyle Kowalski sleeping in weird locations.
Did you say valiantly?
Vaginally.
Oh, that's what I thought you said. I was like, okay. Bradley, where can people find more of your work on the interweb?
You can find me looking both ways before I cross the information superhighway on Twitter at Bryland, Brilund. You can also find me posting many movie and TV reviews on Instagram at I am Bryland. There will be some coming up very soon. And I'm also looking forward to my Onusa's cover of Pet Sematary.
Now that it has to happen.
Yeah, that will come out in 2021 when we finally get around to it.
Awesome.
Well, I'm sure we'll all be alive then, so there you go.
I probably won't. Have you seen
Fair.
my eating habits? Not great.
I mean, I know a place where we can bury you. It's cool.
Go a trip to Maine would be good. Mocha, where can people find more of your work on the interwebs?
You can find me posting videos of myself brushing sticky cats on Twitter at MochaMikeLI, as the Lord intended. Unfortunately, you cannot find me at Mocha Mike. The person who owns that username died recently. I buried him in my local community garden, and I'm just kind of waiting to see if anything pops up so you can give me that password. But in the meantime, at MochaMikeLI, you can also find me on Instagram at MochaMike, where I post some photography work, as well as on Medium, where I allegedly post longer form reviews of the things we talk about here.
Nice. And Sir Shredder, where can people find more of your work and what shows you got coming up?
We've been super lazy. Yeah, my news is definitely sitting down right now. You can definitely find us at jessierandpetsiscat.com.
Thank you for changing that.
Yeah. It's a website where you see good old Jessie Rand petting a cat.
I thought you were gonna go with shits on kids, but I'm glad that
No.
everybody was
No.
thinking it.
He
I don't
shits
mind
on
saying
people of legal age, and that's the end of that.
Shits on cats.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that why they're all sticky?
It's just Jesse running around, just dropping
It's a
shit
collab.
like, oh god, don't move.
This is modern compromise, gentlemen.
Check out more of our work at downinfrontpodcast.com, where you're going to have our video teasers, our music, our Twitter. We have links to Friends with Blends and Mayim News. We also have our Fear Boners information on there, and our last calls are actually being posted on there directly. So that's going to be probably the best area to kind of find all of our information that what we currently are doing. We're at Twitter at _DAFP, where we're also going to be on Instagram. We're going to be on Facebook. Just search for us, downinfrontpodcast.com. If you like what we do, you want to actually support us, consider becoming a Patreon, patreon.com/downinfrontpodcast. Early episodes and kind of bonus content. We're actually going to get ready to release a new sort of expanded conversation that we had from our latest review of us on there. So definitely kind of stay tuned for that. I think that's going to be actually really funny because that was a hilarious conversation, I think. And yeah, thanks so much everybody for tuning in, and we appreciate it. Brylan, what is our next review?
We are going to be reviewing Heck Boy, starring Ron Perlman and Doug Jones. Or actually,
Wait, no, this
Nice.
this is Hellboy, starring that dude from Stranger Things. We'll
David-
see if he does as good a
Harbour?
job as Ron Perlman. Pearl Harbor is his name.
Pearl Harbor. There you go.
Let's not get into that. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Spay and neuter, and also kill your cats.